the money into the NHS, which we haven't been doing really as much as we've been doing. I mean, there are reports today, it's in the Financial Times, where Matt Hancock is breaking fiscal rules to do with pensions for the NHS to avoid an NHS crisis happening before the election. Essentially, to put the story very simply, as I have had to understand it, doctors are being allowed to work over the allotted time they can work before they get into pension difficulties, just so that we avoid an NHS crisis, which is going to affect the vote. Yep. Now, to me, that says that you are in a lot of trouble when it comes to the NHS, to policing, etc., etc. Now, you're going out on the doorstep and you're saying, vote for us and we'll fix all that stuff, but you're saying we're not going to raise any taxes. Where's the money going to come from? I know that Labour have been criticised by finding not only a magic money tree, but a magic money tree forest. But at least they're saying, yeah, no, we are going to raise taxes to pay for it. We are going to borrow more to pay for it. I don't understand where the Conservatives are going to get the fiscal power to haul this country out of austerity.
I don't think that they really are that bothered about the kind of debate around the economy and around austerity, because I think Boris Johnson, and Dominic Cummings have banked on the fact of this being a Brexit election and Brexit being the key dividing line. And as we were talking about before, that really all of these pledges around funding for schools and funding for the NHS is just to neutralise a Labour attack line. I don't think they actually really believe that anyone thinks that the Conservatives are more trustworthy on schools than NHS. They've always been key Labour issues. Now, the problem that the Conservatives are going to run into is that as the campaign has gone on, Brexit is falling down the agenda and the NHS is moving up it. So that now I think polling's showing that the NHS is the most important issue for voters.
Which is why we've seen this story reported in the Financial Times today.
Yeah, right.
About basically breaking pension rules in order to get doctors to work more hours to avoid some sort of crisis.
Yeah, and listen, nobody would want to be like desiring a crisis in the NHS. I don't want to have a winter flu crisis, because that is about vulnerable people losing their lives. And so I think trying to play it in this really cynical way, I don't think is Labour's plan at all. And it speaks to the Conservatives that suddenly they're in an election, that they're suddenly putting, allowing doctors to work longer hours to avoid it when they don't do that at other times when lots of people die around Christmas.
Holly, do you worry though that there's another story today? I think it's on the cover of the Observer, and again, we were talking in the break, how much do people worry about the economy really? And how much do people, as Henry said, do care about the potholes and free parking on the NHS? Now, whether our deficit's gone up and down and in comparison to the borrowing with the GDP, etc., I think the majority of people even comprehend or understand it properly, and that's no disservice to them. I don't understand it either. And when it comes to billions, you kind of like, well, yeah, what's what billion extra? It's like 100 million pounds, But for example, today, after we had Boris Johnson be slightly taken aback by the lady who asked him a question on Friday about the WASPy
pensions,
basically the women born in the 1950s and 60s who were told you're going to come into pension age. They've been paying in all their lives. They're going to come into pension age at 60. They came out, they retired, they didn't get their pension because in the meantime it's gone up to 65. Now Labour have come out straight away and gone, no, we're going to spend 58 billion on women's pension pledge. Just like that, John McDonnell, just like that. He's asked, how are you going to cost it? It's like, well, we're going to borrow it. Does that not contribute to the fact that even someone who doesn't comprehend economy that much, for a party to say just at a snap of a finger after it being raised just in a debate on Friday, we're just going to magic up 58 billion just like that. That's not a good look, is it?
Well, I think there's a few things to say about this. Firstly is that it's not just like it kind of come out of thin air. The WASPy women are supported by Unison, which is a union which supports the Labour Party. John and Jeremy have been meeting with the WASPy women for months and months and months. So it's absolutely, Labour has always supported the WASPy Women's campaign.
It's not a question of whether these women deserve to have... as it happens, I think most people would agree that these women have been hard done by. And I think the Prime Minister said, I hear you, I hear your cause, but the money isn't there. Now, you can argue whether the money is or isn't there. Theresa May told famously in the 2017 election for the NHS nurse who asked her a question, she said there is no magic money tree. She managed to find one to do a deal with the DUP to stay in power. But... how does it play, Henry, to the public, do you think, when parties all of a sudden go, we'll get the money to pay for that? It seems like the Labour Party are just throwing money at the electorate to go, yeah, we can pay for everything?
I think it does matter, and it matters because the electorate's not one big beast, right? It's full of, there's lots of different groups, and I think that it matters with the kind of voters that the Tories need to try and retain, who often are sort of the kind of people who do pay more attention to the economy than the sort of high level economic data stories than some of the others. And I think that even if the public don't grasp, as many of us I think don't grasp the nuances of the Treasury and how big 58 billion or however much actually is, they do have enough of a sense to know when something is implausible and when something is just one more in a long line of implausible promises. The danger for the Conservatives, as I said earlier, is that previously, whatever you think of austerity, they had a very, very clear message to the electorate, which is Labour are going to spend irresponsibly. We are going to responsibly
invest.
No, it was they were going to bring public spending under control. Now, that sort of public spending restraint, sad but necessary, as they pose it, versus profligacy, is a clear dividing line. The challenge for the Tories now is finding a way to keep Labour's promises looking implausible whilst promising spending increases themselves. That's a much subtler messaging distinction. And I think that long term, the fact that there's no Boris Johnson project, there are no Boris Johnson think tanks, there is no Boris Johnson domestic vision that can give his spending promises a coherent narrative that will then allow the Tories to say, well, actually, X or Y Labour promise doesn't work because it doesn't fit this framework. The absence of that is going to make Tory messaging in the next Parliament quite difficult, because if they're just offering a sort of relatively ideologically incoherent set of spending increases, how do they then really go for Labour for doing something similar?
We're going to take a quick break, but we'll be straight back. Reminder that you can get in touch with the show. 0344 499 1000 is the number that you need if you want to have a chat with me, Henry and Holly. You can also tweet us at Talk Radio, as many of you are doing. You can watch us live streamed on our YouTube page and leave your comments. I will read your comments after the break. So we'll take a quick break. The time is now 18 minutes past 11.
We are
Talk Radio. The Alexis Conran Show on Talk Radio with The Times and The Sunday Times. Know your times.
Teaching shapes lives. Becoming a teacher means a career of opportunities. You could head a subject department or work towards school leadership. And with a minimum starting salary of £24,000 to £30,000, teaching has never been so rewarding. Teaching. Every lesson shapes a life. Search Get Into Teaching. Starting salary dependent on location.
Book your seat this November for the chance to win some amazing football prizes with Hyundai. Go to football.hyundai.co.uk and register to test drive a Kona, Kona Hybrid, Tucson or Santa Fe from Hyundai's range of SUVs, and you could win an unforgettable football experience, including a VIP trip to Madrid to watch Atletico take on Villarreal and tickets to top Chelsea games. Book your seat. Find out more at football.hyundai.co.uk. 18 plus, terms apply.
Today, it's Sheffield United v Man United in a tough test for both teams. And with Now TV, you can watch all the action live for a one-off payment of just $9.99. Hold on, they're checking with VAR.
That's confirmed, it's $9.99.
You've got to love the modern game. So, to only pay for the games that matter to you, grab a Now TV Sky Sports Day Pass. Search Now TV Sports. 18 plus, content streamed via internet, full terms apply.
shoes off, slippers on. There's nothing like coming back to a warm home after a long day at work, especially when you've been stuck in rush hour for what seems like an eternity. Luckily, with Hive Active Heating, you can turn your heating on from wherever you are. And with our Black Friday offer, enjoy 25% off, plus a free Amazon Echo Dot. Search Hive Heating to buy now. Hive services require broadband and Wi-Fi. Terms apply. Offer ends 2nd December.
Right, parents, hands up if you know this one. How do you find the best secondary school? Do you A, visit thousands of schools across the country, or B, read Parent Power, the definitive guide to schools with the best exam results?
I know.
I know, me.
Pick up your copy of the Sunday Times today or visit thetimes.co.uk.
Talk Radio Traffic and Travel.
West Yorkshire, southbound M1, 2 lanes closed off for emergency pothole repairs from junction 41 to junction 40 for Ossett. And anti-clockwise M25 is showing us a long queue after a vehicle broke down. Junction 25 to 24 for Potter's Bar. At Maidstone in Kent, A26 Tunbridge Road remains blocked partially by a serious accident between Milton Street and Hartsnarp Street. It's been ongoing all morning. And in Somerset, lots of flooding. That includes Wells Road in Falklands, which is partially blocked near the Tucker's Grave Inn. I'm Bill Sheldrake.
On the 19th of November, EasyJet made history. How? Well, from that day forward, we started offsetting the carbon emissions from the fuel of every single EasyJet flight, domestic and international, by investing in projects that include planting more trees and protecting against deforestation. It may not be aviation history on a par with the Wright brothers, but we feel it's a step we need to take and one we're very proud to be making. To learn more about this and everything else we're doing, visit easyjet.com.
Across the UK, online and on DAB Digital Radio. The Alexis Conran Show on Talk Radio.
Welcome back to the show with me, Alexis Conran, here on Talk Radio. Just a reminder, after 12 o'clock, Will Moy, CEO of Full Fact, will be joining me here, backed by popular demand and an extended slot. He will be here with me for the whole hour, so get your questions in. If you want anything fact-checked, he will be talking about some of the manifesto pledges and also some of the statements by the leaders given in the two electoral debates we've witnessed so far. 0344 499 1000 is the number you need to put your call to speak directly to Full Facts Will Moy. And also coming up at 11:30, we'll be speaking to Liberal Democrat candidate for Edinburgh West, Christine Jardine. With me, I still have Holly Rigby and Henry Hill. They just won't go away. I have to say, always the conversations happen in the breaks as well. So maybe we'll touch upon a couple of the subjects that we've been speaking in the break. But before that, I want to touch on this story that appears in the Times today. 7 Brexiters at risk of losing their seats. This is done with the sort of extensive polling using YouGov polls, but a company called Data Praxis have been using this MRP method of sort of super polling at a constituency level. They are worried, people like Dominic Raab, who's got a 23,000 majority. I mean, if you can't call that a safe seat, I don't know what is a safe seat, but apparently he is predicted to win by fewer than 3,000 votes, which is quite close to call. Others include Ian Duncan Smith, Zach Goldsmith, apparently is 20 points behind in his constituency. Steve Baker, of course, famously, again, even though he denied it to me when I confronted him about it, but he is in a Remain constituency, slightly Remain constituency. Henry, big hitters, big names for the Conservative Party. Is the fear that as closer we get to December the 12th, you will see some sort of alliance and tactical voting? I know there's lots of tactical voting websites, but quite a lot of them disagree with each other so far. But if those align somehow, and we even have some sort of concessions by party leaders to say, well, actually, we condone tactical voting in these constituencies in order to keep Tory candidates out, and especially big scalps like Dominic Raab. I mean, he's the Foreign Secretary. Steve Baker, the chair of the ERG. Ian Duncan Smith, a major figure in the party. How much damage would you see the Conservatives suffering, even if they do return some sort of government, but lacking those big names?
So I think that a realignment in British politics cuts both ways, and in the same way that the Tories could unseat Ed Balls in 2015, and in the same way that
was a big scalp, Nick Clegg,
Labour got Clegg, but and in the same way that you've got polls showing the Tories streets ahead in places like Grimsby that they've never won, that has a swings and roundabouts. There are seats that may be moving away from the Conservatives. Obviously, Ian Duncan Smith and Zach Goldsmith both represent London constituencies,
which are very Remain,
and London, even before Brexit, has been trending away from the Conservatives for some time, and it's one of the big problem areas that they haven't dealt with. The challenge, I think, for tactical voting is that for a tactical voting campaign to really make sense, because you have Unite to Remain, right, which is the Liberal Democrats, the Greens and Plaid Cymru. For a tactical voting campaign to really carry weight, it would need to include the Labour Party. But the problem for Liberal Democrats, especially, is not only do they think that the Labour Party is insufficiently committed to Brexit or to Remain, but also an awful lot of Tory Liberal Democrat swing voters are deeply anti-Labour at the moment because of the leadership of Jeremy Corbyn. So if it looked like... This is why Joe Swinson's had to do this kind of equidistant, I wouldn't put either of them in power type thing. So if it looked like the Liberal Democrats were entering into a formal electoral alliance with the Labour Party, just as I said that I think that the Brexit Party standing down only in Tory-held seats could potentially bite the Tory Party in some places. If the Tories could go and vote for the Liberal Democrats are in bed with Jeremy Corbyn, that could actually help the Tories in quite a few Liberal Democrat facing marginals.
Kensington being one of them.
Potentially, yes, but also in the southwest, but basically well-to-do seats where those voters are deeply put off by Jeremy Corbyn's economic agenda. So it's a tricky one to call. In some seats, you could maybe add up the Labour and Liberal Democrat votes and see them getting more than some Tory big beasts. But on the other hand, there's no guarantee that if you did strike that kind of deal, that the voters would stay in the pre-existing groups. And I think the Tories might be able to to turn that to their advantage in some seats in liberal Romania, if you like.
Just made up a new country there. Holly, what's more important to Labour? Is it the preventing a Tory majority or increasing the Labour number of seats? Because there are certain of those seats where actually a Liberal Democrat has got more chance of unseating a Tory candidate. Some, of course, are Labour candidates got more chance, and I'll put that question to Christine Jardine when she joins us on the line in a few minutes. But could you see a situation where the Labour Party actually officially says, look, we think that you should support the Liberal Democrats in this particular constituency because we would rather see a Liberal Democrat MP returned to Parliament than a Conservative MP, especially in this case, these 7 Conservative MPs, they're not just any MP, they are Dominic Raab, Ian Duncan Smith, Steve Baker. Steve Baker is the chair of the ERG. Even to Labour supporters, which are predominantly Labour members, are predominantly Remain supporters. It would be inexplicable to them if their own party wasn't doing everything they can to dethrone one of the prime Brexiters.
Well, yeah, I mean, from my perspective, I think we're going to win the next election, and I think we're going to win a majority. And actually, if in order for us to enact our programme, which is a radical agenda, we have to win a majority. So I think there is absolutely no possibility that Labour will be coming out and backing alliances and things like that, because we are here to win. We are a serious party.
You are a serious party.
Yeah.
Are you taking the polls seriously? Someone once told me, don't look at each poll, look at the trend. The trend is you are behind. You're behind by double digits. You continue to be behind. Yep. The truth is that no matter how radical and important your manifesto has been, there hasn't been a bump in the polls because of that manifesto. So essentially you went to the country, you said, here are all the wonderful things that we're going to do. Here's how we're going to help everybody who's struggling. The country looked at it and went, okay. Some people were convinced, some not. But essentially, if you look at the polls, you continue to trail what has been a problematic government, and I'm being polite. You continue to trail them, but sometimes up to 19 points. So is it time to be realistic and say, look, a Labour majority is unlikely. Therefore, what is best for this country is to avoid a Conservative majority and work together to get to a point where there's perhaps some sort of coalition or some sort of avoidance of a Conservative government.
Well, I kind of take inspiration from the American Democratic candidate, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who says that it's the media's job to read the polls, it's activists' jobs to change them. And actually what Labour has got is incredibly powerful. We do have this transformative agenda that does mean real change. because I think, you know, people voted for Brexit because they wanted change, and what we're saying is we are offering something very transformational. The second thing is we do have people power, so we've got hundreds of thousands of members who are going out around the country knocking on doors. I mean, if you look at in Ian Duncan Smith's seat, part of the reason he is so terrified is because the candidate there, Faisal Shaheen, has spent the last year basically campaigning and hundreds of people turning out to Chingford and Wood Green to knock on doors every day. And, you know, we're never going to have the media on our side, but we do have these people knocking on doors and saying, listen, these are our policies, and explaining it to people. So, you know, I think we can shift the balance here. I do think we will take some scalps. Nobody expected us to win in Canterbury, in Kensington. And, you know, we say that Kensington's a sort of posh borough, and in some ways it is. It's also the borough that Grenfell's in. And in many ways, you talk about a Brexit election, we could call this a Grenfell election as well, if we look at the sort of state of the housing crisis and austerity and things like that.
But the question remains, getting closer to the time, and this is a question I will be putting to Christine Jardine, who joins us in a second, closer to the time when it is quite clear that the polls haven't shifted enough. You're saying to me, as a Labour activist, that it's more important to you to go for all or nothing. We're all going for a majority or nothing else, rather than we are going to be realistic and try and get as few Conservative candidates returned. So therefore we stand a chance to form some sort of coalition in order to avoid a Brexit scenario, or to avoid a Conservative Party majority. To you, it's more important a Labour majority above everything else.
Well, as I said, I think that in lots of ways polls are often used to shape public opinion, rather reflect it. In fact, a friend sent to me this morning, there was a story in The Independent the day before the election in 2017 predicting that Theresa May was going to get a landslide majority. So, I mean, if I obsessed over polls, then which is what they're designed to demoralise activists like me, so we think, oh, there's no chance, so what's the point in going out knocking on doors? I think there's still a lot to play for in this election. And also the thing that I'm finding is that when I go out knocking on doors, there are still people undecided. I think people have felt very kind of confused by the chaos of the last couple of years, and the election is a very short election. So I do think that we do still have the chance to win over those undecided voters and to win a majority.
Important to say, standing also in Chingford and Wood Green is a Liberal Democrat, Jeff Seif, Labour's Faisal Shaheen, as you mentioned, and Conservative Ian Duncan Smith. A three-horse race there. No independents, no raving monster looning party. No, what was it, Lord Buckethead?
Yeah.
He's standing against Boris Johnson, I think.
I'm missing them all. OK, now we are joined on the line by Christine Jardine, Liberal Democrat candidate for Edinburgh West. Welcome back to the show, Christine.
Good morning.
Lovely to have you on.
Thank you.
I guess I'll have to ask you first, how disappointed were you that you lost the battle with ITV to get Joe Swinson to join Boris Johnson and Jeremy Corbyn on that debate on Tuesday night?
Hugely disappointed, but disappointing more for the electorate than for us, because the electorate need a choice. And they have been offered no choice, because we have someone who is an out-and-out Brexiteer and someone who is now, caved completely on both Brexit and independence, and is offering a position of neutrality on Brexit and saying to the Scottish nationalists, yes, come and work with me, come and work with us, and we'll give you your independence referendum. For the people of this country not to be given the choice of a true Remain candidate, a true Remain party, letting them down, and that's the important thing.
How did you think that when finally Jo Swinson, your party leader, got her opportunity to stand in front of the people on Friday night, dare I ask, how do you think she did?
I think she did remarkably well in front of a hostile audience. I mean, the audience was made up to reflect. It was either the voting or the position in Parliament, and it was very, very heavily skewed towards both Conservative and the Labour Party. Every Scot in the audience.
I think you can say that, Christine, but I think you'll find people from the opposite argument saying that it was very heavily Labour, pro-Labour. Other people will say it was pro-Conservative. But the question remains: Jo Swinson got some tough questions, but perhaps it is that your policy. Hang on, this doesn't work. We're both speaking at the same time. My question to you is: perhaps the policies are not cutting through.
Policies are. We are the party of Remain, and that is going through. People know that. It cut through in the local council elections in England, and it cut through in the European elections massively, where for the first time in 100 years, we beat both Labour and Conservative. Now, what we're seeing at the moment is the polls you were just talking about are predicting a Conservative victory. Now, the only people who can take seats off them in this are the Remain Party. It's the Liberal Democrats, because the Labour Party are not going to take seats off them with this ridiculous manifesto of things that they can't possibly deliver, and this new reality on Brexit. People don't know where they stand. I mean, who's going to vote for a party if they don't understand where it stands on the major issue of the day? The man who would want to be Prime Minister says, I'll negotiate a deal on which I'm neutral.
Okay, we've got a bit of a tricky line, so I just want to get a couple of questions in first. I'm going to ask you the same question I asked Holly just now. There's an article today saying that 7 Conservative Brexiters at a risk of losing their seats. Some very big names there: Dominic Raab, Ian Duncan-Smith, Zach Goldsmith, Steve Baker, among others. This will only work. This will only work if the public in those constituencies vote tactically. That means that Labour might have to give way to the Liberal Democrats, or the Liberal Democrats have to give way to Labour. What is your priority? Holly said that Labour's priority is going to be just getting an outright election. The Liberal Democrats, I know that you are a party that you have to campaign on. Of course, we're going to get a majority. Let's just put that aside for a second and just be a little bit more realistic. A Liberal Democrat majority is not going to happen. Therefore, what is more important to you? Is it more important to still, regardless of that reality, go forward to try and get as many Liberal Democrats returned to Parliament in this general election? Or does your priority shift to try and getting as few Conservative Party candidates returned into this Parliament? And that means standing down in areas where you give a non-Tory Conservative, a non-Tory candidate the opportunity to win that seat?
Well, we have actually already done that with Unite to Remain. We've worked with Plaid Cymru, and we have worked with the Greens to ensure that in 60 seats in this country, the Remain candidate has the best possible chance to win. Now, you're talking about the Labour Party. The Labour Party had the chance to talk to other parties who didn't take it. And what you see now is a Labour Party, which in a lot of seats is struggling itself. And the Liberal Democrats are the only ones in those Brexiteer seats. The Liberal Democrats are actually the only ones who can win with the Remain vote, because we are the only ones who are 100% committed to Remain. The Labour Party isn't. The Labour Party, I mean, John McDonnell has refused to say now whether he'd back Leave or Remain in a future EU referendum. Now, if you genuinely want to stay in the European Union, you're not going to vote for the Labour Party, because the Labour Party doesn't have a clear position other than this weird neutrality. We've had 3.5 years of constructive ambiguity, which has been constructive for nobody, either in the Labour Party or for the electorate, and now they're neutral.
Okay.
So why would anyone who wants to remain in the European Union vote Labour?
Okay, a question from Henry Hill.
Hi, Christine. You mentioned Jeremy Corbyn's position on Scottish independence and the fact that he said that he will potentially collaborate with the Scottish National Party. Does this create a strategic dilemma for the Liberal Democrats? Because of course you're being pressed on the one hand about anti-conservative tactical voting, but in Scotland, of course, there's also the question of whether or not there should be anti-SNP tactical voting for the unionist MP or pro-union MP best placed to win an individual constituency. And at the national level, for all that, yes, the Conservative Party is committed to Brexit, Boris Johnson has said quite explicitly that he will not grant the SNP a referendum on independence in the lifetime of the next Parliament. So as a pro-UK party, who has to choose between potentially a Labour government which might prevent Brexit but which will grant IndyRef 2, and a Conservative government which will deliver Brexit presumably but will block IndyRef 2, how do you come down? Which of those two things is more important?
It's quite simple. We are the only party in Scotland which is both pro-UK and pro-Remain. So people who want to stay within the European Union and within the United Kingdom vote Liberal Democrat. It's quite simple. There is no dilemma in Scotland. The SNP is 100% for independence. The people who now have a dilemma are Labour voters, because they see that their party, their unionist they sought party is now openly committing to a referendum. Jeremy Corbyn keeps saying, well, not in the first couple of years, but the FMB have pounced on that and said, yes, we can work with him, and we will have negotiations with him, and we'll put Jeremy Corbyn to number 10. The Liberal Democrats will not put Jeremy Corbyn into number 10.
So does that mean that if you had to choose between the two, you would choose to put Boris Johnson into Downing Street to prevent IndyRef 2? Because you have to, it's going to come down to one of them. Would you rather it was Boris Johnson blocking IndyRef 2, or would you rather it was Jeremy Corbyn potentially blocking Brexit? Which, if you had to choose, and if there's a hung parliament, your party will have to choose, even if it's choosing by omission, which would you choose?
No, we've been absolutely clear on this. We will not put either Boris Johnson or Jeremy Corbyn in number 10. We have said, if today, and Joe repeated this, was if there is a law comes before Parliament which offers a referendum on a deal with Remain part of it, we will vote for that. But we will not put either Jeremy Corbyn or Boris Johnson in number 10. It's quite simple.
Okay.
That is what...
okay.
We're not in the business of putting other people in government.
Okay. As we're struggling with your line... Christine, as we're struggling with your line, let me just give Holly just one last question, because the line's a little bit crackly. So, Holly Rigby, one question.
Yeah, so I teach in a secondary school in Newham, which is one of the most deprived boroughs in London, and I teach sixth formers all the time who have severe anxiety about the level of debt that they're going to get when they go to university, and that often dictates the choice about whether they're going to go. Joe Swinson, in the debate, apologised for raising tuition fees, but if you're really sorry, why are you not reversing the rise in tuition fees, which is really affecting students like mine?
Well, I sympathise, because I remember what that decision was like for myself, and actually more recently for my daughter, and I do know how difficult it is. And we do have to find a way of alleviating that stress for students and finding a way for university to be affordable for them. But what we've seen in Scotland is where the SNP, we did away with tuition fees, and then the SNP did away with the maintenance. That is that for some reason it is not actually encouraging students more than 5 years to go to university. One of the main problems is that the number of foreign students who have paid twice as much for university coming to Scottish students is taking up a number of places at Scottish universities and actually making it more difficult. And then you have the ridiculous situation where students from the rest of the United Kingdom have to pay as well. So yes, we know that there is a problem, and that the fact that young people are worried about the future, to me, is completely unacceptable. We have to find a way of alleviating that anxiety, and we have to find a way of encouraging them to pursue the route that's right for them. And let's be clear, university isn't what everybody wants. It isn't right for everybody. It isn't the best choice, and it isn't the only way to succeed in life.
Okay, Christine, I'm afraid I'm going to have to leave it there, because your line is getting progressively worse. But thank you very much for your time, as always. That's Christine Jardine, Liberal Democrat candidate for Edinburgh West. Also standing are Labour's Craig Bolton, Scottish Green Party Elaine Gunn, Conservative Graham Hutchinson, and the SNP's Sarah Mason. Jack Graham on YouTube. You should have got your question in quicker, Jack. He says, why are the Lib Dems not investing in a green industrial revolution? Had you put that in earlier, Jack, I could have asked Christine for you, but I tell you what, I'll ask the next Lib Dem candidate. I'm making a note, and I'll ask the next Lib Dem candidate we have on. I'll ask them that question. You keep your questions coming at 12 o'clock. At 12 o'clock, Will Moy, CEO of Full Fact, joins me here for an hour. Last week he did half an hour. We couldn't fit all the questions in. Get your questions in now for Will Moy from Full Fact. He is going to be looking at some of the claims the leaders have been making in the debates, and also some of the manifesto pledges. All that to come after 12 o'clock. We're going to take a quick break. Keep your calls and your texts and your tweets coming. 0344 499 1000 is the number you need. Tweet us at Talk Radio.
Countdown to the election on Talk Radio.
The manifestos, the mandates, the mother of all radio stations.
Up to the minute breaking news and instant reaction. Your election station, Talk Radio. The Alexis Conran Show on Talk Radio, with the Times and the Sunday Times. Know your times.
Millions of people are missing out by having a current account that doesn't pay them any interest on their hard-earned money. TSB offers interest to all their Plus account customers for no monthly fee. Plus, you can stop your friends and family missing out by recommending the Plus account to them. And when they switch, you'll both earn £75. Search online or visit your local branch. Terms and conditions apply.
Like all good tradespeople, Ford likes an early start too. That's why our Black Friday has already begun. Enjoy amazing savings across our hard-working range of new commercial vehicles. Save between £2,500 and £9,650 off the recommended retail price. Why wait until the 29th of November, when you can have that Black Friday feeling today? Plus, there's 0% APR representative on Ford Acquire. Search Ford Black Friday. Ford, backbone of Britain.
Exclusions apply. Combined promotions available till 30th of November 2019 at participating dealers. For Ford Acquire, finance subject to status and deposit restrictions apply. Free post Ford credit.
Unlimit the tunes you love this Christmas on Vodafone. With Spotify Premium included on our unlimited data plans with entertainment. The future is exciting. Ready? Vodafone.
Available on Unlimited and Unlimited Max plan. Maximum download speed applies to unlimited plan. Speed and coverage may vary. Full terms on Unlimited and Entertainment at vodafone.co.uk/unlimited.
Picture a boy. He's in his teens. In a classroom. Distracted. What do you see? A lack of concentration? Or do you see what we see? A young man wondering how he can change the world. There are troops on peacekeeping missions that need that right now. Your army needs you. Find where you belong. Sedge Army Jobs.
Talk Radio, traffic and travel.
West Yorkshire, southbound M1, 2 lanes closed off for emergency pothole repairs from junction 41 to junction 40 for Ossett. And anti-clockwise M25 is showing us a long queue after a vehicle broke down. Junction 25 to 24 for Potters Bar. At Maidstone in Kent, A26 Tunbridge Road remains blocked partially by a serious accident between Milton Street and Hartsnarp Street. It's been ongoing all morning. And in Somerset, lots of flooding. That includes Wells Road in Falklands, which is partially blocked near the Tucker's Grave Inn. I'm Bill Sheldrake.
On the 19th of November, EasyJet made history. How? Well, from that day forward, we started offsetting the carbon emissions from the fuel of every single EasyJet flight, domestic and international, by investing in projects that include planting more trees and protecting against deforestation. It may not be aviation history on a par with the Wright brothers, but we feel it's a step we need to take and one we're very proud to be making. To learn more about this and everything else we're doing, visit easyjet.com.
Across the UK, online and on DAB, the Independent Republic of Mike Graham on Talk Radio.
Blasted rhetoric from the Banana Republic.
Join me, the Reverend Mike Graham. Revolutionary, rebellious, rebuilt, rebranded.
Dangerous mid-morning debate with the great dictator.
The Independent Republic of Mike Graham.
Tomorrow morning from 10.
On Talk Radio. Across the UK, online and on DAB Digital Radio. The Alexis Conran Show on Talk Radio.
Welcome back to the last part of Talk Politics with me, Alexis Conran, here on Talk Radio, sponsored by The Times. Know your Times. With me, I have Labour activist and English teacher Holly Rigby and the assistant editor at ConservativeHome, Henry Hill. After the 12 o'clock news, we will have Will Moy, Chief Executive of Full Fact, will be here fact-checking all the manifesto pledges and some of the statements by the party leaders that we've heard over the last week. Some of your messages coming in here on Facebook. John says, I'm not impressed by any of the manifestos. All I want is to leave the EU like we instructed our employees. Don't understand what you instructed your employees.
Pay our taxes, their employees.
Michael Clayton on Facebook says, what's the point of a manifesto? Jess Phillips has admitted on live TV that they generally cannot promise to deliver on a manifesto. We did cover that, I think. If you're not going to have manifestos, then what are you going to have? You're going to be voting for parties to do what exactly? But, things change. Adrian says on Facebook, Labour are betraying the British people. How, Adrian? That's a curious statement. They are offering another referendum on the British, on the EU question, and you will have a choice to vote then. The lady on at talk. Oh, this is to you. You're the lady, obviously.
Okay.
Let me check this. Just it has been vetted. The lady on Talk Radio saying Corbyn should stay neutral to show neutrality to the EU. No. His job as Prime Minister is to act in the best interests of the country, the UK, something he has never done in his entire political career. How can a neutral negotiate? You couldn't make this up.
Do you want me to respond?
I think that merits a response. He's called you a lady, so I think the least you could do is answer his questions.
To the lady on the left.
Yeah.
Well, I would actually say that Corbyn is an incredibly principled person. He has held, the same principled views for all the time he's been in government. Like, he's consistently voted against austerity. He's consistently voted against war. He was part of the movement against apartheid. So I think the idea that you can't trust Jeremy Corbyn is just a bit of a nonsense that's created by the media, because he has kind of always stood up for what he believes in.
All right. Paul, long-time listener Paul, big Brexiter, says no Brexiter would bother voting in a Labour referendum. It's pointless. I mean, that is a fear, Henry, isn't it? For people who did vote to leave, the idea that they will see this referendum as something that they could vote for, which is going to give them the option between Remain and something that is Brino, the Brexit in name only. Paul makes a point.
He does.
I think
this is one of the big problems with the sort of slightly simplistic narrative that we've had, that a second referendum will sort everything out and it will draw the sting from the wound and bring the country together. Because one, referenda, as you prefer to have them, are divisive. They are often divisive, especially on this. A second one, I think, will be especially divisive. But also, the question that you pose matters. And I do think that for an awful lot of Brexiteers, a choice between Remain and a deal negotiated by Jeremy Corbyn is no choice at all. But and especially, you were mentioning in an earlier segment about tactical voting. Yeah. I think that. But earlier than that, you were talking about the wisdom of Jeremy Corbyn being neutral. I think there's a real tension, because if Jeremy Corbyn is returned to Downing Street on the back of any kind of arrangement with the Liberal Democrats, then the idea that he could continue to pose as an honest broker on Brexit would be shot to pieces because of the Liberal Democrats' quite hardline stance on the question. Mm-hmm. So if, in the end, his path to Downing Street involves supporting the support of Joe Swinson, he will be seen as a Remainer, and I think that will fatally undermine the credibility of any referendum he offers. Well,
I don't quite see that, because Jeremy Corbyn's already said that he will offer a referendum within 6 months. So this idea that he will come to power by Joe Swinson saying, we'll only support you if you give us a referendum, well, he's already promised that. So I don't see.
I think in terms of the fact that it will look like, because a lot of these voters are already deeply suspicious. Mm-hmm. And I think that the problem is, if Jeremy Corbyn does it on his own, I don't necessarily agree with his strategy, but I do think that if Jeremy Corbyn does it on his own, you've set out the case for him being neutral. I just think that if this is delivered not by a neutral Labour government, but by a coalition with explicitly pro-Remain parties, for a lot of these voters, you might be able to rationally argue it out. I think for a lot of them, it will just look like a stitch.
It's funny because, being Greek and growing up under a different political system, in a sense, what he's doing is he's taking the place of what we have in Greece, which is a president. Yeah. The president is ultimately the head of the country. He doesn't rule, but he makes sure that whatever Parliament decides is being implemented. But the president is seen as a neutral force. He is voted in by Parliament, and of course, the Prime Minister has a lot to do with who gets to be president. But it does offer a sort of a consistency into a head of government who does remain neutral and says, well, the people have voted for Parliament has decided X, Y and Z, and that needs to be implemented. And I think that's what Jeremy Corbyn is trying to place himself in that position. I see the flaws, but I can also see the logic as well.
I think the challenge is that doesn't really fit into a system where he also has to lead the party in the House of Commons.
Exactly. And also he may get to an awkward position where the party which has decided that it will have that one-day conference and decide to back the deal that they've negotiated or Remain, if his party is backing Remain and he's the leader of that party and the Prime Minister, it's going to look a little bit odd if he's staying neutral.
Well, I mean, I would question about how it's going to play out, like just in the lead up to referendum itself, because my personal feeling is that, you know, MPs, activists should be able to campaign on either side, and that the party itself should never become either a Remain party or a Leave party.
It's going to be an MP by MP basis.
Yeah,
isn't
I
it?
think that's right.
You
and
can't see
activist by
Keir
activist.
Starmer, you know, getting behind any sort of deal.
But also, you know, there are, you know, 35% of Labour voters in 2017 also voted to leave the European Union. So it wouldn't really make sense for us to say that the divided line in this country is between Leave and Remain. And so I think, I think it's really, if you're going to have a second referendum, having Corbyn, the person who's delivering that, being neutral is the only way that after that you could bring the country together. Otherwise, you're just going to be divided.
Well, it's certainly different to what's been happening in the past, and people having to step down because the things that they've promised or stood behind just didn't come to pass. Let me get some more of the messages. Jenny on Facebook says, nothing of Labour's has made me want to vote for them. Paul, we've done. Shane on YouTube says, I wish Labour would outlaw private school. The normal schools would get sorted.
Fantastic, I agree.
Well, that's slightly extreme. There was a bit of misconception on this one, wasn't there? That when it came out that Labour were going to basically shut down private schools. That's not true, is it? And you're best placed to tell us that. But they were going to remove the charitable status.
Yeah.
They're not going to shut down those schools, right?
Yeah, so, I mean, as a teacher, and as I said earlier, I work in one of the most deprived boroughs in London, like, it does feel really wrong that my students are statistically less likely to end up in the law, the media, the arts, sports and things like that. So that obviously Labour has committed to the principle that this is an injustice which must be addressed. Now, we passed a motion at conference that asked the Labour Party to take quite radical action on this. We didn't expect that radical action would all be, you know, done on day one of a Labour government. And actually, if you look at Finland, which has phased out almost all of its private schools and now has one of the best education systems in the world, that took about 30 years to achieve. Now, I hope we do that a lot more quickly than 30 years. I think we're going to win this election, and I think we're going to win the next one. And I think that over a period of time, yes, those private schools should be integrated, because I don't think that we can say that we live in a fair and just society if some parents pay almost 3 times the amount for a private school education than in state schools like mine.
Henry's shaking his head, so I'm going to have to, because we've run out of time. Henry?
So, setting aside the principal case for independent institutions, shutting down private schools would shut hundreds of thousands of pupils into the state school system. It would take the money currently spent on fees out of the schools, out of the broader school system, and it would exacerbate the postcode lottery created by the comprehensive system, because suddenly the parents, the wealthy parents of these hundreds of thousands of children, would be back in the house in the postcode lottery game, and you have just as much stratification within the comprehensive sector between the top flight comprehensive schools in expensive areas and many of the others, and this would only exacerbate that problem. So really, private schools are not the problem. If you really want to address the challenge, you need to address the problems within the state sector.
Okay, I know I've used up all my time, but a quick question for both of you. Henry, what do you think we need to watch out for in the coming couple of weeks? What do you think could change the course of what essentially looks like the Conservatives are staying ahead?
You need to look for whether or not the Tories are holding ground in Scotland because they're rallying the pro-union vote. You need to see whether they're holding ground in the West Midlands by holding on to the Brexit vote, with the Brexit Party having stood aside. And you basically need to see whether or not they can land their manifesto without staking their coalition through the heart like they did in 2017.
Holly? What are your lookout points to come? What could be potentially flashpoints? And what, if anything, I mean, Labour, I know you want for a Labour majority, you are behind. Something big is going to have to happen to change the opposition. What may that be?
Well, I think it will slightly come back to sort of events, dear boy events, like what is going to happen in society in the next 2.5 weeks. We touched already on the fact that there's a growing NHS crisis, the flooding that's already happened. You know, there's a possibility of that escalating again. There was the fire in the student blocks that recently happened last week. Yeah, in Bolton, exactly. And I think when these things happen, they kind of really expose the Conservative government for not having the answers on real issues. And I think the more of those that will happen, and they will happen, I think they'll be game changers, definitely.
Okay. Thank you to both. Holly Rigby, English teacher and Labour activist, and assistant editor at ConservativeHome, Henry Hill. Lovely to see you again, Henry. Great first time, Holly. Thank you. Hope we see you again. Thank you for being here. After the 12 o'clock news, Will Moy will be in the studio with me for a whole hour, taking us through manifesto, pledges, putting them through the fact test, and also statements made by political party leaders over the past week. Are they true or are they just spinning to you? If you want to get a question in or speak directly to Will, give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number you need. You can tweet us at Talk Radio. You can continue to watch us on our YouTube channel. It's 12 o'clock news next.
This is
Talk Radio.
The Alexis Conran Show on Talk Radio with The Times and The Sunday Times. Know your times.
At Dacia, we don't like to blow our own trumpet. Our customers do that for us by making Dacia Europe's fastest growing car brand in 2019. So to say thank you, we're now offering a £1,000 deposit contribution on the Dacia Duster with 6.9% APR representative finance. Search Dacia Duster today. Dacia PCP Finance, £1,000 finance deposit contribution is available on new Duster Prestige and Tech Road models only. Subject to status 18 plus, T's and C's apply. Ordered, registered and financed by 17th of December 2019. Retail customers are participating dealers only.
Let the festivities begin with a third off our wonderful range of artificial trees and Christmas lights. Homebase. Feels good to be home. Terms at homebase.co.uk.
Are you prepared for Black Friday? Are you going to get up at 4 in the morning? Is your queuing strategy sorted? Relax. The Black Tag event is now on at Carphone Warehouse. Get the Samsung Galaxy S10 for £39 a month with 90 gig of data. Or save £70 on the Google Pixel 3a, now $329. The Black Tag event, now on at Carphone Warehouse. Galaxy S10, $49.99 upfront cost. Select 24-month contracts. Google Pixel 3a, what's $399. T's and C's apply. See website for details.
Today, it's Sheffield United v Man United in a tough test for both teams. And with Now TV, you can watch all the action live for a one-off payment of just $9.99. Hold on, they're checking with VAR.
That's confirmed. It's $9.99.
You've got to love the modern game. So, to only pay for the games that matter to you, grab a Now TV Sky Sports Day Pass. Search Now TV Sports. 18 plus, content streamed via internet. Full terms apply.
Right, parents, hands up if you know this one. How do you find the best secondary school? Do you A, visit thousands of schools across the country, or B, read Parent Power, the definitive guide to schools with the best exam results?
I know.
I know, me. Pick up your copy of the Sunday Times today, or visit thetimes.co.uk.
Across the UK, online and on DAB.
Your election station. Talk Radio.
Across the UK, online and on DAB.
Talk Radio, on the hour news headlines.
I'm James Lower. Good afternoon. Labour is promising to compensate an estimated 3.7 million women who lost out because of reforms to the state pension age. The party's election pledge would mean the average payout could be in the region of £15,000. The Shadow Chancellor, John McDonnell, says women weren't given enough time to prepare for the changes.
They were given no adequate notice, they were not properly informed, and it's caused real hardship. And some of these women, if we don't do it now, some of them will no longer be with us. I think we have a sense of responsibility to address this injustice.
Meanwhile, the Tories are launching their election manifesto later, and the NHS, education, Brexit and taxes all feature heavily. Elsewhere, a 23-year-old man has been charged after 39 people were found dead in a lorry container in Essex last month. Christopher Kennedy from County Armagh is accused of human trafficking offences. A man has died after he was found stabbed in a car which crashed in London. Police say they think the victim, who was in his 20s, was attacked before the collision outside West Ealing train station early this morning. The 13-year-old girl is among 5 people who've been arrested after major disorder at a cinema in Birmingham. The others, aged 14, along with a 19-year-old man, were detained after trouble involving up to 100 people. 2 machetes were seized and 7 police officers suffered minor injuries. A man's been arrested after Jewish children received anti-Semitic abuse on the London Underground. Police have detained a suspect in Birmingham. A man was filmed reading anti-Jewish Bible passages to 2 young boys before a woman intervened. And a fundraising page to help a charity save koalas from Australia's deadly bushfires has raised more than £1 million. It's feared more than 1,000 have died in the flames in recent weeks. So weather then, dull and misty across many parts of the country, gradually turning brighter and drier though, but further wet and windy weather reaching the southwest.
Talk Radio Sports Update.
Premier League managers Marco Silva and Unai Emery are both under increasing pressure after Everton suffered an embarrassing defeat at home to Norwich and Arsenal scraped a draw at the Emirates against Southampton. Later, Manchester United take on Sheffield United in the only Premier League game today. The winner could go 5th in the table. Elsewhere, Deontay Wilder has defended his WBC World Heavyweight title for the 10th time with a stunning knockout after being outboxed by Luis Ortiz for 6 rounds. But in the 7th, Wilder's devastating right hand left Ortiz stunned and beaten on the canvas. And Great Britain have been knocked out of the Davis Cup in the semi-finals by Spain. They now play Canada in the final today.
Talk Radio. Across the UK, online and on DAB Digital Radio.
Talk Politics with Alexis Conran on Talk Radio.
Welcome back to the show with me, Alexis Conran, here on Talk Radio. Thank you for joining us. We are now going to enter into our fact-checking mode because we have Will Moy, Chief Executive of Full Fact, who joins me in the studio. Will, I've got to say a heartfelt thank you for coming back. This is your third time now, and we've extended you to an hour. We're taking you the whole hour, but I think it's important. I think it's important for people to be able to ask questions, to be able to fact-check and get away from the spin, especially with stories that they read and they agree with. I think that's those are the ones you really want to look closely into. So thank you very much, Will.
Thank you for having us.
Giving us your time. Keep your questions coming to Will. He's brought his laptop here today, so we are like fully connected. It's not just off his how you can keep all that information in your brain. I know not, but keep your questions coming. You can ask questions via Twitter at Talk Radio. You can also text the word talk followed by your question to 87222, and you can continue to watch us and comment on our YouTube channel. If you go to the Talk Radio YouTube channel. Now, you have come prepared with some of the things that we've been seeing in the manifestos. I suppose the Conservative manifesto is going to be released in the next couple of hours.
That's where my afternoon's going.
That is your afternoon there done. So we'll have to wait till next week when you join us to fully pick through that. Although, from what it sounds like, there's not going to be that much to pick through. I think 60 pages, they've said.
I mean, you read 60 pages and see if you think that's light reading. To put it in perspective, we have automated software now that combs through the manifestos and pulls out the number of claims in each manifesto and a list for us. And we're seeing more than 1,000 factual claims in some of the manifestos.
Wow.
So by next week, we should have an idea of how they all compare. But I think it's going to be quite hard work.
Okay, so let's kick off. We're looking at our first one is the Labour manifesto launch, which happened this week. And on the NHS, they've said Mr. Johnson's preparing to sell out our National Health Service for a United States trade deal that will drive up the cost of medicines and lead to the runaway privatisation of our health service. 500 million a week of NHS money could be handed to big drugs companies. That is what Labour have been saying about the Conservatives. What have Full Fact been looking at?
It's worth saying this is one of Labour's major lines in the election, and during Jeremy Corbyn's launch speech for the Labour manifesto, he was actually interrupted by the crowd shouting not for sale about the NHS. And if you put that point to the Conservative Party, they would say, well, no, it's not for sale. We promised not to sell the NHS. We would never do that. So if you're happy to take their word for it and accept their promise, then you don't have to worry about this claim. But what's going on underneath it is a worry about the trade negotiations we're going to have with the US if we leave the EU to try to get a trade deal. As I've said, the Conservative Party has said that the NHS will not be on the table in those talks, but the US have published their negotiating objectives for the negotiations on a trade deal, and they're explicitly about increased access for pharmaceutical companies in the US to the British market.
So that is true. That is a fact.
That is what the US would like to have happen.
Right.
So if you take, and this is where Labour's figure, this 500 million a week, is extreme and it's unrealistic. What they've said, essentially, is that if the US managed to get a deal where people in the UK pay the same amount for medical drugs as people in the US do, then that's about 2.5 times as much as we currently pay. Then that would be equivalent to the NHS having to pay £500 a week more.
500
million pounds a week. Or, thank you, Alexis. But if you look at the trade deal that the US recently did with Australia, that actually hasn't changed that difference in drug prices significantly. So the Nuffield Trust, who are health experts, they studied the NHS all the time, call this a fairly extreme scenario, and I think they're right. It's reasonable to be concerned about what's going to go into that trade negotiation. Do you trust the government to make those choices? And there's lots of things that are going to be decided behind closed doors that will affect us. But the idea that you're going to increase the costs of the NHS by what is equivalent to a fifth of everything we spend on healthcare at the moment is pretty out there.
But it's fair to say that it is basically Labour have taken some some figures and have gone straight to the worst case scenario. It is it's fair to say, if we could say, you tell me if I'm overselling the mark, it's fair to say that it's possible but unlikely.
It's possible that drug prices will be affected by a trade deal with the US. It's extremely unlikely that it'll be anything like the figures Labour are saying. So we've seen these kind of two different tactics from Conservative Party and the Labour Party in the election so far. The Conservative Party have essentially claimed that Labour are going to do things that Labour say they aren't going to do, and then put scary price tickets on them. We've seen that tactic several times. From the Labour Party, we've seen this tactic of talking about things that might happen in trade negotiations and then giving you the very worst possible case scenario, and this is what there is.
Okay. Keep your questions coming. I know a few of them have been arriving. I will put them to Will over the course of the hour. Will's going to be here with us until 1 o'clock. So keep them coming in. Also, get on the phone. 0344 499 1000 is the number you need. You could tweet us at Talk Radio. Text your question to text the word talk followed by your question to 87222. Moving on to the next claim that you've been looking into is the Liberal Democrats manifesto. They are saying that they have a £50 billion Remain bonus. So the idea that the Liberal Democrats would win an outright majority, and then one of their manifesto pledges is to straight away revoke Article 50. No referendum there, nothing to ask. They feel that they will have been given a mandate if the majority of the country votes to return a Lib Dem government. The Remain bonus. We've heard about the Remain, the Leave bonus, and that was making the rounds when Theresa May was still Prime Minister, saying that actually leaving the EU will result into a sort of a Brexit dividend, I think it was called at the time.
It was.
That was sort of rubbished.
Serious economists, by and large, think that being in the EU is better for the economy than being out of the EU. Now, what's really important to understand is they're not saying the economy will shrink if you leave the EU and the economy will only grow if you stay in the EU. What they're saying is the economy will grow if you leave the EU and it will grow by more if you stay in the EU. Mm-hmm. And the Liberal Democrats are getting their £50 billion from saying, well, that's how much more the economy will grow. And if you look at the various bits of economic modelling that serious economists do that are relied on for all the other economic discussions we have that aren't so politicised and polarised as this one, they are basically saying that somewhere between 2% and 7% of economic growth is kind of contingent on whether we stay in the EU or not. Now, I would be the first to say that forecasting the future of the economy, hugely complicated. You can't just say it's definitely going to be £50 billion because nobody precisely knows. But the underlying logic of why they make these forecasts is basically the countries trade more with countries close to them. That's just something you can see happening. Yeah. And the similar, that's the word the economists use for it, is gravity. And the more similar your rules are, so in the EU we all have the same trading rules, so you can in principle trade with France almost as easily as you can trade between Sussex and Surrey or East and West Yorkshire. The more similar, the easier it is to do that trade. So that's the logic behind these models. And if you follow them through and you do the maths, 50 billion is a reasonable, not exaggerated interpretation of what the economists are saying.
Wow, big numbers, and they are reasonable. Keep your questions coming in. I'm going to go back to the Labour manifesto on tax. Now, again, the one thing that we have been guaranteed, because Sajid Javid gave an interview this morning, is that there is a triple lock on tax by the Conservatives. So no rise in income tax, VAT or national insurance. Labour, on the other hand, have said that they will not increase VAT, but they won't increase VAT or income tax or national insurance for anyone earning less than £80,000. So there's no increase for 95% of UK taxpayers. Is that true?
Again, that's a promise, and as long as you're happy to accept the promise, then they're right. The 95% of taxpayers earn less than £80,000. The question for both of the parties about this is, well, what about the other taxes? It's all very well to say we won't raise these taxes.
So, for example, Labour are saying that they're going to raise corporate tax from, I think it's 19 at the moment, to 26.
I would have to double check, but I think those are the right figures. And they're also going to scrap the maternity allowance. So they have already identified some other taxes and allowances that they would want to change that will have an effect on the rest of the 95%. The Conservatives, again, have made this promise, but they haven't yet, their manifesto isn't out, been explicit about what other taxes you may change. So the question when you get these promises of we won't change some taxes is, do you really care, or do you care about what you end up paying overall?
Yeah, I've just checked the it's going to rise to 26%, the corporate tax under Labour. I know that we're going a little bit off script here, but one of the pledges that came out, I think accidentally, from the Prime Minister in one of his speeches was this national insurance cap rising. There was a confusion about how much better off people are going to be in the long run. £500 a year was mentioned at one point. Now people are going, actually, no, it's 98 or it's 100. Have you had time or been able to look into that? One of the key pledges says not to raise income tax. But this is an extra 250 million a year childcare support. Okay, we can put that aside. I'm just here we go. Raise the national insurance threshold from 9,500 in 2020 with the ambition to raise it further to £12,500. So, can you explain a little bit about that to us? Is this the threshold from which you have start to pay national insurance tax?
So, yeah, basically, as many people know, you don't pay any national insurance until you earn a certain amount of money.
Right.
And over the last few years, particularly starting under the coalition government, there was an effort to raise the lowest level at which you start to pay national insurance. And the idea was to benefit the poorest paid earners in society. And what the Conservative Party were talking about is raising that threshold again, with the same kind of end in mind. It's interesting that the Institute for Fiscal Studies, they're the people we rely on to do this analysis. They're experts in public spending and they're experts in taxation and benefits and how that all ends up affecting everybody. They reckon that these plans are going to cost £2.4 billion, which is a lot of money, and only 3% of the gains are going to go to the poorest households and 8% of the poorest working households. So they think that if you're trying to help the lowest paid, actually raising the national insurance threshold is, they've called it, an extremely blunt instrument to doing that. So, yes, the promise is here. They think that the difference that would make is actually about £85, not the £500 we originally heard mooted. So,
and that's a year.
Sorry?
And that's a year.
That's a year, yeah.
Okay.
So that's the kind of scale we're talking at. But yeah, what we try to avoid fact checking before the official party manifestos are out. So obviously this afternoon we'll see what the Conservative proposals actually are, and then we'll be able to crunch the numbers properly. Because of course you can give with one hand and take away with another, or you could talk about giveaways and just not talk about the other parts of your programme that might actually cost people money.
Yeah. Or how you're going to pay for them, which is also problematic.
So for voters, when you're trying to protect your vote, the big thing is don't get hung up on the individual promises. What's the total effect on my life going to be? And that's what we want to help people with.
Okay, we'll be carrying on looking at claims made by Jeremy Corbyn, Nicola Sturgeon, Joe Swinson and Boris Johnson in Friday night's debate. A few other issues on the Lib Dem manifesto and Labour manifesto. As Will has just mentioned there, the Conservative Party manifesto is going to be launched at about 2 o'clock. So next week we'll have a fully in-depth look at that manifesto. And I'm sure Will and his team will have fully fact-checked that from fullfact.org.
Starting this afternoon.
That's your Sunday gone. Keep your questions coming at Talk Radio. You can get in touch with us, 0344 499 1000. That's the number you need.
This is
Talk Radio. The Alexis Conran Show on Talk Radio with The Times and The Sunday Times. Know your times.
Oh, what a brilliant photo.
Look at Danny in the background laughing.
And Matt smiling.
Wait, is he holding hands with Sarah?
You're kidding!
Don't miss a thing. Like being able to claim a pair of Silver Galaxy Buds when you purchase the Samsung Galaxy A90 5G before the 2nd of December. The Samsung A90 5G has 4 cameras, so you can capture every detail, because the detail matters. Get the latest Samsung Galaxy A90 5G now at your local 3 shop or 3.co.uk. Offer available on purchase made by 2nd of December 2019 and claimed online within 30 days. T's and C's apply.
The nights have started to draw in, and at DFS we know that can only mean one thing. Everyone's spending more time at home getting nice and cosy. Ah, you can't beat it. That's why our autumn-winter collection sofas are handmade to order for complete comfort. And many are guaranteed to be delivered in time for Christmas. So make sure you come home to a sofa that's perfect for you. DFS. Guaranteed Christmas delivery and selected sofas end soon.
Gosh, can we put the heating on?
Sorry, it's broken.
Can I play some tunes on my phone then?
Yeah, afraid not. Play CDs though.
This car belongs in a scrapyard.
I know, but I get nothing if I scrapped it.
Actually, you can get at least £2,000 off a new Ford for it.
Really?
With Ford's New for Old scrappage scheme, you can get between £2,000 and £4,250 off a new Ford car if you scrap an eligible vehicle with us responsibly. Also, there's 0% APR representative on Ford options. Ford. Together, we go further. Search Ford Scrappage. Exclusions apply. Contracted and registered by 31st of December 2019 at participating dealers. Age and ownership criteria apply to scrappage vehicle. Subject to status. Free post Ford credit.
Teaching shapes lives. If you're thinking of becoming a teacher, our expert teaching advisors can give you the level of support you need to get one step closer to the classroom. Teaching. Every lesson shapes a life. Search Get Into Teaching. Advisor support subject to eligibility.
Talk Radio Traffic and Travel.
South Yorkshire A631 Bawtry Road, closed off in both directions. That's been flooded. And the M5 for the West Midlands, very foggy around that part of the country at the moment, particularly around Junction 3. So watch out for that. Tunbridge Road in Maidstone in Kent, it's blocked partially by serious accidents between Milton Street and Hartnop Street. It's been ongoing all day so far. And Pease Pottage, West Sussex, A23, we're seeing some queues through the roadworks, approaching the M23 Junction 11 for the services. I'm Bill Sheldrake.
Gosh, can we put the heating on?
Sorry, it's broken.
Can I play some tunes on my phone then?
Yeah, afraid not. Play CDs though.
This car belongs in a scrapyard.
I know, but I get nothing if I scrapped it.
Actually, you can get at least £2,000 off a new Ford for it.
Really?
With Ford's New for Old scrappage scheme, you can get between £2,000 and £4,250 off a new Ford car if you scrap an eligible vehicle with us responsibly. Also, there's 0% APR representative on Ford options. Ford. Together, we go further. Search Ford Scrappage. Exclusions apply. Contracted and registered by 31st of December 2019 at participating dealers. Age and ownership criteria apply to scrappage vehicle. Subject to status. Free post Ford credit.
Outspoken opinions and decisive debate. The Alexis Conran Show on Talk Radio.
Welcome back to the show. Me, Alexis Conran, here on Talk Radio. With me, I have Chief Executive of Full Fact, fullfact.org, and we are fact-checking. We are fact-checking some claims in the Labour manifesto, the Liberal Democrat manifesto. We're touching on the Tory manifesto, but as it's officially not been out yet, it's fair to say that Will and his team have not had the opportunity to delve deep inside that manifesto as it's going to be launched today. Next week, we'll be looking at the Conservative Party manifesto in depth because it will be out there. And of course, you don't want people commenting on something they haven't read.
It's hard to do.
It's hard to do, but it doesn't stop most people.
Yes, sorry. With due respect to all the people who are currently doing exactly that.
Correct. Now, let's look at one last claim before we go to the Lib Dem manifesto. We've already touched on the 50 billion Remain bonus, but Jeremy Corbyn and most Labour spokesmen have made this claim that Boris Johnson saying "Get Brexit Done," which is actually the title of their manifesto, "Get Brexit Done" was a fraud on the British people. Now, I suppose that is a very subjective point of view, but is there any fact in it? Well,
it's a political argument, and you can make your own mind up about what you think about it. Their argument, which is right, is that we're not going to start talking about Brexit anytime soon. Brexit is a process, not an event, and we are going to be negotiating with the EU our future relationship for years to come. Fine. What I think the Conservatives would say is if you pass the withdrawal agreement that Boris Johnson negotiated, the UK will stop being a member of the EU. And that amounts to Brexit being done. Now, after that, the UK will continue to follow EU rules, and it will continue to pay money to the EU during a transition period where we agree a future trading relationship, a trade deal with the EU. So it's reasonable to say we'll still be talking about Brexit after that. But is it fraudulent to say you've got Brexit done when the UK stopped being a member of the EU? We thought that was pretty strong language. At the end of the day, it's up to voters to decide.
Is it perhaps, I saw a study, and again, it's very easy to say, I saw a study somewhere, but there was a study done with what the perception of Get Brexit Done was all about, and there's that confusion between the withdrawal agreement and the future deal. And sometimes people getting a little bit confused because we've been talking about a deal, but that meant there are separation terms rather than the future deal. That a lot of people think that perhaps this withdrawal agreement, that's it, we've done Brexit, onwards we go. But actually the reality is, as you've just mentioned, if the Conservatives win a majority and can get their Brexit deal passed January the 31st, 2020, yes, we are, to all intents and purposes, out of the EU, but that's when the big negotiation starts, which is what is our future relationship with the biggest trading bloc in the world going to be?
Exactly. And that's kind of my big regret from after the referendum. What I wish we'd done is just publish that flowchart of we've got to do this negotiation, then we've got to do that negotiation. This might be described as the end of the beginning, to coin a phrase.
OK. Let's move on to the Lib Dems as well. We've had time to look at their manifesto. They one of the big claims that sort of has cut through quite a lot is air pollution has caused at least 40,000 premature deaths per year.
Yep. This is from a 2016 report from the Royal College of Physicians and the Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health. And basically they're looking at two things. One is tiny, tiny particles in the air, which can be bad for you. And one is nitrogen dioxide, which is a toxic gas in the air, and what effects they have. What they're not talking about is the number of people who have a death certificate with the words air pollution on them. What they're looking at is there are lots of illnesses, lung diseases most obviously, which are made worse by polluted air. And they're trying to figure out, well, what is the total effect on people's lives of all of that? And if you add that all together and you make lots of estimates, and it's all rough around the edges because you can't be precise about this kind of thing, they come up with a figure that 40,000 deaths a year can be attributed to air pollution because a disease has been made worse, not necessarily because it's caused a death directly itself. It's a reasonable number to use. It comes from reasonable research.
Okay, I'm pretty sure, and I will look it up, but I'm pretty sure there was a death of a young girl, if I remember correctly, that after years of looking into the cause of her death, it was decided, even though she did have some asthma problems, from what I remember, it was decided that her death was directly linked to pollution, air pollution. So I think it's a conversation that is not going to go away, and it's an issue that is still there.
I remember the case you're talking about. And
yes, thankfully.
And that's those decisions about how do you attribute the cause of death in those kinds of choices are professional judgments, right? It's not necessarily that there's a clear right answer. The coroner or the doctor has to make a choice. But the wider story that air pollution is bad for people, and if you have toxic air in your lungs, ultimately it's going to make diseases worse, and ultimately some people are going to live shorter lives or less healthy lives as a result. That's the argument that these Royal Colleges of Doctors are making, and it stands up.
Her name was Ella Kitty Deborah. She died in February 2013. She had 3 years of seizures, 27 visits to hospital from asthma attack. She was 9 years old, and she lived 25 metres from the South Circular Road in London, which, for those of you outside of London, notoriously high levels of pollution. So there we go. That was. I remember covering it at the time, and it was a very, very sad story. Moving on to some more Lib Dem manifesto claims. Rough sleeping has been increasing since 2008, for the 2008 recession. So this isn't entirely under the Conservatives' watch, but since 2008, the global crash. And rough sleeping, of course, connects to all Labour Party manifestos mentioned that we need to build more houses. The Conservatives are also saying we need to build more houses. Rough sleeping, often conflated with homelessness, because of course you can be homeless but not sleeping rough. The homeless people count, also the people who are in temporary accommodation are considered homeless.
Yeah.
So there is that often confusion between homeless and rough sleeping in the streets. What are the facts behind that?
So rough sleeping is, as you can imagine, hard to measure. The people we're talking about aren't in one place all the time. They're not necessarily that keen to sign up to a survey or something like that. So the way we measure it is by asking councils to make an estimate on one particular at one particular time. It's a snapshot survey. It's definitely not precise. There's a very good chance it underestimates rough sleeping. So just to put that caveat out there. But roughly speaking, rough sleeping is 2 to 3 times higher than it was back in 2010, almost 10 years ago. So it used to be around 1,800 people were thought to sleep rough in 2010. It's now about 4,700 people thought to sleep rough. It has dropped slightly in the last survey by about 2%. Over the last year, but basically the big trend is, yes, rough sleeping is thoroughly up. And unfortunately, they changed the way they counted it back in 2010, which obviously there was a change in government from Labour to the coalition. They changed the way they counted it, and we can't make comparisons to before 2010.
Right. This is another one that, again, it's something that we'll see both Labour, the Lib Dems, Greens, basically anyone who's not a Conservative, come up with, and it has to do with knife crime. I did speak on my show last night about Boris Johnson's 3-point plan to tackle knife crime. One was that people should be arrested immediately and charged the same day and brought to court within a week. Bizarrely enough, that is what is happening at the moment. The fact that people are not maybe seeing court within a week has nothing to do with the police. It has more to do with the justice system hanging together by a thread. The second point of that plan was to give police powers to stop people who are known previous offenders. But I had Dal Babu, who was an ex-superintendent of the Met, who said it's all very well giving police officers new powers, but if there aren't enough police officers to carry out those powers, then they're not going to make much of a difference. And one point that we don't talk about enough, and I learnt my lesson yesterday from Mr. Babu, was we talk about the 20,000 police officers who were removed from the streets by the Conservative government. But we don't talk about the 18,000 police staff that were also removed from... He quite rightly said we shouldn't call them backroom staff because that sort of diminishes their responsibility. But another 18,000 part of the police force. Now, they don't have warrant powers, so they can't patrol the streets and arrest people, but they are just as important to the running of the police as the 20,000 police officers. But however, the claim we want to look at is knife crime has increased by over 75% since 2015. I hate to ask you this because it is one of the things that winds me up the most, because we have the National Crime Survey and the reported crime, which are two separate things. They often don't agree with each other, so it just comes to, which one are you going to pick today?
Yeah, and actually what the Liberal Democrats have picked is crime recorded by police, and that's where they're saying that knife crime has increased by over 75% since 2015. The difficulty with police recording crime is it only happens when police notice crime, when it's actually reported to them, and when they recognise it as being in a certain category. We know that data is affected by how likely people are to come forward to the police and actually say, this has happened to me, and changes in what the police are focusing their attention on.
Okay.
So, for example, if the police decide to do a crackdown on cannabis use, then you will get a spike of recorded crime on cannabis use. It doesn't necessarily mean that anyone's actually smoking more weed than they were the week before. So those are kind of all the caveats on that data. If you look at the crime survey, you don't see the same spike. But what I think is really interesting, because what we really care about is what's happening in the real world, not what's happening in the numbers. If you look at hospital admissions for assaults by a sharp object, they've been rising consistently for the last 5 years. They were at 3,600 in 2014-15. They're now at 5,100 in 2018-19. Now, that's still below the levels we hit in the 2000s, and obviously bad enough to end up in hospital with a wound from a sharp object is a subset of knife crime, but it does give you a sense that yes, there's a real problem here.
There is a rise. Let's go to some of your calls. Now, bear in mind that you might be asking Will to fact check things that Full Fact have not had the time to look into, but I'm sure Will's
happy to take things away.
Will's what Will's been brilliant at is he goes away from the Sunday show and actually answers these questions. He will be back next week and he will be able to answer those questions. So let's speak to, shall we go to first? Let's speak to Alan in Hampshire. Alan, welcome to the show. What would you like to say?
I was wondering if they could fact-check the last and using past manifestos to find out who, either Labour or Tory, when they were in power on their own, actually did what they said in their manifestos. Marked out of 10 for whatever they said they were going to do, because I think someone agreed to make some more houses and not a brick has been put down yet in the 2017 manifestos from the Tory party.
Okay, so I think, thank you, Alan. Thanks for your question. So, Alan, and it's something that's come up in the show before, of the manifesto pledges, and I realise this is a very general question, of the manifesto pledges, so for example in 2017, how much of it was put into actual legislation and practice? Let's take the claim of the housing. I think Liz Truss got herself in very hot water on Politics Live with Andrew Neil because of these new starter homes that they were meant to build, quite several thousand of them. The actual number of how many homes they actually built was zero, which didn't look good. But it's not fair to say that the Conservatives haven't built any homes, because they have built quite a few homes. But in general questions, and maybe we're not looking at specifics right now, in answer to Alan's question, from the manifesto that the Conservative Party won, well, they didn't actually win a majority, but they got into government.
That's your problem.
Right. And that's what we explained actually earlier on the show, that it's all very well, but a manifesto pledge is if you get into government with a healthy majority and you can carry this stuff out.
Yeah. So what was the last time that happened? We're now on the fourth general election. We've fact-checked, starting with the one in 2010. And having a kind of government come in with a majority to do the things it wants to do and not massively distracted by Brexit basically hasn't happened. So there was a wonderful project called GovTracker that actually tried to seriously do this, that was trying to follow all of the promises in the manifestos and work out whether they'd happened or not. But the problem is, well, who are you going to blame for the last kind of period? Boris Johnson can say, well, I wasn't running the government, it's nothing to do with me. Theresa May's government has been and gone, and basically...
And they can also say, we didn't get the majority.
Didn't have a majority, couldn't do what we want. Yeah. Essentially weren't able to do a lot of the things on the domestic side because they had to focus on trying to get a Brexit deal. Okay. So the disappointing answer is, firstly, a manifesto is only as good as your willingness to trust the political party to deliver it, because you have no comeback except your next vote if they don't deliver it. But secondly, in the last few years, they haven't really had the ability to deliver things, even if they've wanted to.
Okay. Let's take another question quickly before we go to the break from John in Swansea. John, welcome to the show. What would you like to say?
Good afternoon. A little earlier you were talking about whether we actually left the EU or not if Boris gets his agreement through. Now, Jeremy Corbyn has said that if he gets into power, he very much is going to, in 3 months, negotiate a brand new withdrawal agreement, also negotiate a free trade agreement,
I don't think he said that. I think
he did say it in the debate, but it's
okay.
not actually Labour's policy. But he did say it in the debate on Friday night.
That is exactly what he said, because he is then going to put the whole thing to a party conference and then have, within 6 months, a referendum.
Okay.
Which will now the Electoral Commission say that they can only put together a referendum in a minimum of 24 weeks, 5.5 months, give or take. And they can only do that once they know what the questions are going to be. So how does Corbyn reckon he can actually put a referendum to the country, having negotiated a brand new agreement within 6 months?
Okay, John, thank you for your question. Good question, actually, from John there.
Yeah, short version is it's really, really tight.
Right.
The Institute for Government are the people who look at this kind of mechanics of how do you do government-y things. And they've looked at this. And essentially, you would have to be passing the legislation to do a referendum while you're still negotiating the thing that you want to hold the referendum on.
But John made a great point there, which I hadn't thought of. I have to say, thank you for that, John, is that the Electoral Commission can only set up a referendum if they know what the question's going to be.
Yeah. So,
but I suppose, as he said, what the question's going to be is going to be between Remain and my deal.
Essentially, yes.
Right.
So it is just about possible that they could finesse that and come up with a question that doesn't depend on having finished negotiating the deal, get the legislation through while you're negotiating. But the Institute for Government experts think it's a very tight timetable to pull it all off.
Now, he did say there, and we have the quote in front of us, this will be a trade deal with Europe or remaining in the EU. I think he's talking about the referendum. That will be the choice that we put before the British people within 6 months. Any other option will require years of negotiations, either with the EU or the USA, and put our public services at risk. A lot of people are asking, well, if it's taken 3 years for us to get to this point of having a withdrawal agreement bill that has been agreed by Parliament, what makes Jeremy Corbyn think that he can come back with a withdrawal agreement bill in 3 months? Is that realistic?
Well, let's be clear. What Jeremy Corbyn said in the debate was not actually Labour's official position. Labour's official position is to negotiate a withdrawal agreement with the EU and a non-binding political declaration on the future trade relationship between the EU and the UK. And that's the same sort of package that Boris Johnson did his quick renegotiation on. So the withdrawal agreement is the divorce bill. This is how we get out. And the political declaration is essentially, this is the kind of trade deal we'd like to have. Now, it's just about possible that if the trade deal that Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party want to negotiate is very similar to current EU membership, so we're still in the single market, we're still in the customs union, that kind of thing.
And also they have been saying that they have been through these 3 years having meetings with the EU, so they're not starting from scratch.
And the EU's thought deeply about what it cares about and all the rest of it. It's just about possible that there is a quick trade deal to be done, but it will be done after the referendum, because the EU has been consistently clear that we'll negotiate a withdrawal agreement and then we'll negotiate a trade deal. So this idea that you can have the entire thing washed up in 6 months is just pretty surprising.
A great question there from John. Thank you very much, John from Swansea. Really good question. Keep them coming in. Give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number you need to ask your question. Will's going to be with me until 1 o'clock, after which Jamie East will be taking over until 4. You could tweet us your question at Talk Radio. You can text it. Text the word talk to 87222, followed by your question. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be straight back after this.
Across the UK, online and on DAB.
As the nation gets ready to go to the polls, don't miss Talk Radio's dedicated election coverage. Countdown to the general election on Talk Radio. The Alexis Conran Show on Talk Radio, with the Times and the Sunday Times. Know your times.
You know the trainers I really wanted? I got them 70% off.
Wow, that's amazing. Where from?
Online at Zalando. They have so many Cyber Week deals on right now.
Attention travellers, we have reached our final destination, Black Friday at Zalando.
Save up to 70% on thousands of shoes, accessories and clothing. Zalando. Free to be.
Like all good tradespeople, Ford likes an early start too. That's why our Black Friday has already begun. Enjoy amazing savings across our hard-working range of new commercial vehicles. Save between £2,500 and £9,650 off the recommended retail price. Why wait until the 29th of November when you can have that Black Friday feeling today? Plus, there's 0% APR representative on Ford Acquire. Search Ford Black Friday. Ford, backbone of Britain.
Exclusions apply. Combined promotions available till 30th of November 2019 at participating dealers. For Ford Acquire, finance subject to status and deposit restrictions apply. Free post Ford credit.
Today, it's Sheffield United v Man United in a tough test for both teams. And with Now TV, you can watch all the action live for a one-off payment of just $9.99. Hold on, they're checking with VAR.
That's confirmed. It's $9.99.
You've got to love the modern game. So, to only pay for the games that matter to you, grab a Now TV Sky Sports Day Pass. Search Now TV Sports. 18 plus, content streamed via internet. Full terms apply.
The Sun are giving away £1 million to causes you love, and we want you to tell us who should get the money. So whether you want to keep the lifeboats afloat in Swanage, get the wheels on the minibus to go round for a children's hospice in Hull, or give a donkey sanctuary in Eastbourne a boost. Nominate a charity you love at thesun.co.uk/50 and see if you can help get them a share of the £1 million. The Sun at 50, celebrating ordinary people doing extraordinary things.
Talk Radio, traffic and travel.
Well, in Kent and Maidstone, the A26 Tunbridge Road, it's still partially blocked by serious accidents between Milton Street and Hartnup Street. Berkshire westbound M4, 2 lanes closed off for emergency pothole repairs. That's from junction 13 to junction 14 for Hungerford. And the Surrey section, western stretch, M25, really slow now from Staines at 13 to the N4 at 15. Bawtry Road in Bawtry, South Yorkshire, closed off in both directions between Church Street and Scapsworth, and that's because it's been flooded. I'm Bill Sheldrake.
Mate, this fan's suspension is rubbish.
Tell me about it.
Even the radio's had it.
I know, but I'd get nothing if I scrapped it.
Actually, you can get at least £2,000 off a new Ford for it.
You're kidding?
With Ford's new for old scrappage scheme, you can get between £2,000 and £6,250 off a new Ford van if you scrap an eligible vehicle with us responsibly. Also, there's 0% APR representative on Ford Acquire. Ford Commercial Vehicles, backbone of Britain. Search Ford Scrappage. Exclusions apply. Contract and register by 31st of December 2019 at participating dealers. Agent ownership criteria apply to scrappage vehicle. Subject to status. Free post for credit. Deposit restrictions apply.
On DAB, online and on your mobile. Countdown to the election on Talk Radio.
The radio station that's always first past the post with up-to-the-minute election news, expert comment and instant reaction.
Countdown to the general election on Talk Radio. Outspoken opinions and decisive debate. The Alexis Conran Show on Talk Radio.
Welcome back to the last part of the show with me, Alexis Conran, here on Talk Radio. With me, I have Chief Executive of Full Fact, and we are dealing with your questions. Now, before we get to some other quotes from Nicola Sturgeon, Joan Swithin and Boris Johnson, there was a question by Matt here on Twitter, and it had to do with proposed inheritance tax. CCHQ went out on the offensive, a little bit premature. I think it was before the Labour Party manifesto had been published. But hey, who's to stop people commenting on a manifesto they haven't read yet? But his question was, the Conservatives had claimed Labour tax proposal would slash the inheritance tax threshold from £475,000 to £125,000, meaning families will be hammered for passing their property to their loved ones. That's what the Conservatives claimed Labour were going to do. What are the facts behind that?
So this is complete rubbish, and this is from 5 years ago. This is a crucial thing. This is something the Conservatives... So it's rubbish now. This is something the Conservatives were saying 5 years ago based on rumours about what Labour Party's policies would be. So the lesson here is please be careful online. This is circulating around as a screenshot of a tweet that the Conservative Party put out 5 years ago saying this is what we think the Labour Party is going to do in November 2014. The Labour Party has, of course, published its manifesto for this election. That was, 2 elections ago? In their manifesto and their document about how they're going to pay for things, they have said that currently thanks to changes that George Osborne made when he was Chancellor, so previous Conservative government, the inheritance tax threshold for a home is £475,000, i.e. if it's worth that, you pay inheritance tax. Labour want to reverse that change, which would mean that you pay inheritance tax on a home that costs £325,000 or more. So that's what Labour are actually proposing. It's nothing like that rumour, but that rumour is spreading online and people are taking it seriously. They're not noticing that it's actually a 5-year-old tweet that's being screenshot.
Okay.
We are tracking stuff that's going viral online. We will be fact-checking it. We will be monitoring it. But just please be careful about what you share.
Well, and this is what this section of the show, which we you know, you're going to be with us for the whole of the election period. So this is what we're going to be doing here. Let's quickly go to Boris Johnson. He made a claim in the leaders' debate, said that the Conservatives are putting the biggest ever cash boost, quote, biggest ever cash boost, end quote, into the NHS. Is that true?
Basically, no, because it works this way. If I said, Alexis, I'll give you some money to buy a Mars bar, you'd be very happy, I hope, if you like Mars bars.
Yeah.
But if I only gave you 25p, because when I was a kid it only cost 25p to buy a Mars bar, you wouldn't be so happy, right?
Yeah.
What the Conservatives are doing is ignoring inflation. They're ignoring the fact that stuff gets more expensive over time. Yeah. If you factor that in, then actually it's not even the biggest cash boost since the last 5-year period.
I wasn't expecting such a succinct, quick, factual answer for that, but thank you. So that's not true. I'm not going to bother with the 40 new hospitals, but just because I'm feeling chipper,
there are only 6 of them.
Only 6, but why does he
and they're not
insist?
new hospitals; they're upgraded hospitals. They're not new hospitals.
So I was wrong as well. I thought there were 6 brand new ones.
There are not. So you imagine this is 6 kind of empty bits of land that are getting new hospitals.
That's
what
I
it
thought.
actually is 6 hospitals getting space to upgrade or rebuild or put a new children's hospital in.
So where does the 40
something.
come from?
The 40 is they're giving money to a lot of hospitals to say, you can plan what you might want to build in future. And you might get money for that at some point in the future. But the only people who are guaranteed money to actually build anything are the 6, and those are upgrades, not new hospitals.
Oh. And even though you fully fact-checked that, and you're not the only fact-checking organisation that's done that, it's still being repeated over and over again, not just by the Prime Minister, but by others as well.
We've seen a few hints that they might not say it in their manifesto, based on what the news reports have been. They might actually get it right in future, but we're watching.
Okay, let's look at something that Nicola Sturgeon said. She said about Scotland's deficit. My more fundamental point, she said, is this. If the argument against independence is that Scotland has a big deficit, that is a deficit that has been accrued under a Westminster system of government, and we have got a big deficit because of that. That is not an argument for Scotland staying the same.
I mean, it's not, but it's not an argument that Scotland will be better off independent either. This is the debate we had in 2014 during the Scottish independence referendum. Scotland's deficit, that's the amount of money the government spends more than it brings in every year, is higher than the UK as a whole. So if you take that as a percent of the size of its economy, the deficit was between 7% and 8.5% of the size of Scotland's economy, depending on how you divvy up the North Sea oil. If you look at the UK as a whole, it was only 2%, so that's considerably higher. Why should you care? Well, Nicola Sturgeon, of course, is in favour of independence for Scotland, and one of the things they would like to do is join the EU, and that requires a lower deficit, usually, to join the EU. The other thing is that obviously having a deficit can be problematic for the public finances. So what Nicola Sturgeon was arguing was, I'm not in control of Scotland's economy. But the thing is, if you look at what independent economists say about what would happen if she was, is they would still need to reduce spending or raise taxes to make their public finances work. So just saying, look, I'm not in control, therefore this isn't an issue, doesn't really stack up. You've got to start talking about what you would actually do if you became independent. And that's kind of, essentially, she dodged the question.
Matt, who was asking us the question about the inheritance tax, he's not letting it go. He's like a dog with a frisbee. He's come back and said this is partially true, and the answer that we gave him, because actually, and he rather helpfully sent me a screenshot of the date. It's November 20th, 2019. So the Conservative Party have been making that claim. Now, I would suggest to you, Matt, and I think Will may back me up, is that they may be making this claim now, but they're taking it off news that was old news.
Is this the inheritance tax?
Yes, correct.
So
yeah.
I've just had a message from the office, and I'm very grateful to my colleagues who've picked that one up. I have misunderstood the message they sent me live fact-checking the show. You're absolutely right. This is actually a message that the Conservative Party was putting out more recently, but before the Labour manifesto came out. So what they said was based on essentially them making claims about what Labour would do. Those claims weren't true. That's not what Labour wants to do. It's now circulating as a screenshot of what they're saying, and it basically should all be ignored.
So regardless of when it was dated, and thank you, Matt, for being persistent, and we're getting the truth out, it's just not true what the Conservatives are saying, which is that Labour will reduce the income inheritance tax threshold from 475,000 to 125,000 is just not in the Labour manifesto.
And it's really important to say, by the way, as I said at the top of this show, one of the tactics we saw from the Conservative Party in this election was this making claims about what Labour would do and putting terrifying price tags on it, and this is one of the examples of that.
Yeah, and of course the Labour manifesto comes out and it doesn't have the same information that is out there. So we've used up almost all of our time. Will, are you going to be back with us next week?
I'm back with you next week. I'll be back with you whenever you want us.
Thank you. I think this works. An hour is enough time to get, because there's a lot of stuff happening, and also next week we'll be looking in depth with in the Conservative Party manifesto. There's also another debate, I believe, this week.
There are more debates, and there's constant negotiations about what debates. The other thing is, tell us what you're seeing in your local area. We'll need some warning of this, but if you're seeing leaflets that make you wonder, is this really true, and that kind of thing, it's really hard for us to see. We see the national campaigns. We'd love to know what's going on in your constituency, so post in leaflets and things like that. We'd love to take a look.
And always check, remember, you can always check, especially things you agree with. You can go on to fullfact.org. It's a really, really simple website, easy to search. And also, and for those of us, let's admit it, quite a lot of us see a long article and kind of dread to think, but you're very good in putting, this is the claim, this is the reality, right up at the top of the article. So if you want to quickly check something, it's easy to do.
And if you want to check it out, we link to all of our sources so you can make your own minds up.
Exactly. And you can find that at fullfact.org. You can also find that on Twitter at fullfact. Will, thank you very much, as always. We've used up all of our time. Coming up next is going to be Jamie East. He's not here to tell us what is going to be coming up on the show, but I think I can do this from memory. It's going to be quiz, possibly, music, film, TV, and great guests. He's nodding at me through the window, and he's saying, yeah, I've got it correct. So there we go. As Jamie East, after the 1 o'clock news, that's me done. I shall be back here on Talk Radio from 7 o'clock next Saturday evening. And of course, don't forget, Talk Politics returns Sunday, 10 a.m.
We are
Talk Radio.
The Alexis Conran Show on Talk Radio with The Times and The Sunday Times. Know your times.
4 years free servicing. Vauxhall's all-new multi-award-winning fuel-efficient vans, keeping you on the road so you can crack on. Search Vauxhall Van Event or visit your local retailer. Offer available 18th to the 30th of November. Vauxhall carries British business. Free scheduled service.